and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the depths of the Middle Swamp in Wyoming's capital of Cheyenne. And my friends, it is deeper than you could possibly imagine today. There's a ton of stuff that we've got to cover on the program. Just to give you kind of a rundown, what's happened in the last 24 hours, a district court in Cheyenne has ruled that the Wyoming legislature doesn't fund education enough. That's absolutely right. At $20,000 per student, we're not funding education enough. I don't know how we could fund it anymore. I mean, unless, of course, they just have gigantic piles of cash laying around for every student. But in any case, a judge in Laramie County has decided that the Wyoming legislature doesn't fund education enough. So I don't know how we could do differently, but apparently that's the case. Also, Senate President Bo Biteman has said that they're not going to pass a supplemental budget. No, they've spent the entire legislative session talking about the legislative budget, and that's all they've been doing. They introduced it in the Senate and went through all of the changes, and they actually passed their own version of it, spending over $100 million more than the House. And then yesterday, Bo Biteman just says, "Nah, we're not going to do it anymore." But don't expect me to shed any tears over that. I might think that that's a good deal. I think it might be a good idea if you were actually cutting programs. And in all fairness, there was some stuff that was cut, but the biggest portion of it, he's hidden in other bills. So we're going to talk about that. Also, a favorite actor of mine, Gene Hackman, died yesterday in his home with his wife and his dog. Don't really have any details what happened there, but poor Gene Hackman, Lex Luthor, is dead at the age of 95. So plenty of stuff to cover on the program. And it's Open Line Thursday. That's right, my friends. Open Line Thursday on Cowboy State Politics Live. This is the day where if you want to talk on the program, we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. You are in the driver's seat today, unlike the rest of the week where it's a Dave-tocracy and you pretty much have to do what I'm going to do. But anyway, Open Line Thursday today on Cowboy State Politics Live. The phone number, if you want to be in part of the program, is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. If there's something on your mind, something sticking in your craw, or if you just want to pontificate, I may let you get away with that for a little bit. But anyway, it's Open Line Thursday. One more time, that phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989. But we begin with the court ruling out of Laramie County from the Wyoming Turkey Vulture, and I quote, "A Laramie County district judge has ruled that Wyoming has been unconstitutionally underfunding its K-12 public schools, a victory for the Wyoming Education Association and the 8 school districts that joined as plaintiffs in the case. U.S. District Judge Peter Froelicher released his 186-page decision Wednesday, concluding that Wyoming's funding model for the K-12 public school block grant is unconstitutional and no longer cost-based. The block grant funds teacher and non-teacher salaries, as well as classroom supplies and energy costs. Every year, the legislature has the opportunity to fund an external cost adjustment to the K-12 block grant that accounts for inflationary costs. There are two current funding models, a statutory one for the legislature and an evidence-based model, which is the constitutional baseline for funding public K-12 schools in the last few years. The legislature's statutory funding model has been below the evidence-based model. So Froelicher, the judge, has said that the state's funding model, that is the legislative one, has failed to properly account for inflation adjustments. So this order just came out late yesterday, so really nobody's had enough time to dig through it and figure out what Froelicher actually means. But let's just look at the big picture for a minute. Wyoming is either number one or number two in the nation for funding education. And I mean, that's pretty much by any measure. Of course, the placements there, they go up and down a little bit, depending on which set of statistics you want to look at. But the truth is that Wyoming's near the top. So in the nation, we spend more money per student than pretty much any other state. And if you actually look at the numbers, it's right around $20,000 per student is what we're spending. So it's kind of hard to imagine that we could spend more. I mean, I guess we could just open up the checkbook and give all money to education, which is probably what they want. The teacher salaries. The truth is, we pay teachers more than most of our surrounding states. And if you want to get down to brass taxes on it, the educational outcomes of our students are way down in the mediocre range. Our Wyoming students are not performing to the level of other states, no matter how much money we throw at education. So anyway, there's this district judge ruling. And by the way, if you want to know exactly how much money the state is spending on education, you need to look at what's called the CREW report, CRERW, and just search for it online, and it will tell you everything you want to know about education in the state of Wyoming, even down to how much we pay the janitor in any school district. So you could choose, for example, Sheridan School District number 3, which is Claremont, Arvada, kind of all the outskirts. Well, you can find out exactly how much we paid the janitor at the Claremont High School. And it's a fascinating read, although, it's about 100 pages of different charts. But like I say, it tells you everything you want to know. And if you read through that thing, the only conclusion that you can come to is, wow, we spend a crap load on education in the state. Now, this Froelicher guy, he disagrees. And he says, well, we could fund it better. Let me see if I can find, let's see here. Froelicher also maintained the court's jurisdiction over the case until such time as the constitutional violations have been fully remedied. In other words, the court will continue its jurisdiction for enforcement of all the issues mentioned. Let's see here. I'm not even going to read what the comment from the WEA was. But here's the problem. And this is again, judges that are legislating from the bench. It is the job of the Wyoming legislature to determine how much money goes to education. And the Wyoming Constitution just says that education will be fully funded. So the question is, what does fully funded mean? And this Froelicher guy is trying to come up with the definition of what that term is. Whether that's listed in his order or not. I mean, that's basically what he's saying. So I don't know what fully funded means. I don't know if $20,000 per student is enough. Heck, maybe it needs to be $40,000 a student. A better suggestion is studies have shown that you can pay for private school tuition for your kid for around $7,000 a year. So maybe we ought to just do away with the public schools entirely and let people, use the $7,000 and go educate their kids at a private school. That suggestion made Steve Harshman's head almost explode. But anyway, so there's this federal court ruling, and one of the big problems is we're at the end of the legislative session. The Wyoming Constitution clearly lays out how long our legislators can be down here in Cheyenne, and during a general session, it's 40 days. And next Thursday, I believe it's next Thursday, it's the 6th of March. Yep. Next Thursday is the last day. So really, there isn't time to comply with the judge's order. Now, this leads into another story here the other big one that I mentioned, but I want to wait and go to that in just a second, because there's a lot of other issues involved in the supplemental budget that I think we need to talk about. So first, found this piece in the Washington, or I think this is in Breitbart. But the Washington Post editor quits after Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is the guy that owns Amazon, and he also owns the Washington Post. Listen to this. He orders the opinion page to defend free markets and personal liberties. Now, who would have thought that Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon, the guy that has been a radical leftist all through the first Trump administration and through the Biden administration, now he's saying that his paper has to defend personal liberties and free markets? I think it's incredible. But the question is it virtue signaling or not? Does he actually mean it? Or is it just, hey, look, Trump, look what I'm doing with my paper? Well, let's get into the article and then we'll answer that question. And I quote, the Washington Post opinion editor David Shipley resigned Tuesday after the paper's owner, Jeff Bezos, announced that going forward on the opinion pages, quote, we are going to be writing every day in support and defense of two pillars, personal liberties and free markets. Bezos made the announcement to the Post staff on Tuesday. We'll cover other topics too, of course, he added, but viewpoints opposing those pillars will be left to be published by others. Quote, I am of America and for America and proud to be so. Our country did not get here by being typical, Bezos continued, and a big part of America's success has been freedom in the economic realm and everywhere else. He stressed that freedom is ethical. It minimizes coercion and practical. It drives creativity, innovation, and prosperity. Of Shipley, Bezos said, I offered David Shipley, whom I greatly admire, the opportunity to lead this new chapter. I suggested to him that if the answer wasn't hell yes, then it had to be no. After careful consideration, David decided to step away, which means that David Shipley, the guy that runs the opinion pages at the Washington Post, he's not in favor of free markets and personal liberties, which is kind of shocking because the press historically in this country has been the defenders, supposedly, the defenders of personal liberties. I mean, it is by personal liberties that we're able to print newspapers. I've got a story later on in the stack of stuff about Scotland passing a law that they can jail you for praying in your own house. So in this country, we have to be very thankful for the freedoms that we have and those people who are willing to defend it. Now, the question is Jeff Bezos really willing to defend that? I don't know that we have the answer to that, but given his history, I would suggest that we should trust but verify, in the words of Ronaldus Magnus. Let's continue with the article. Jeff Bezos says, quote, I'm confident that free markets and personal liberties are right for America. Of course they are. What a dumb thing to say. They are absolutely right for America. I also believe these viewpoints are underserved in the current market of ideas and news opinion. That is an absolute fact, my friends. Bezos said in closing, I'm excited for us together to fill that void. And one of the reasons why private media, and I say private media because, it's, I guess you could say it's alternative media, but things like this program, one of the reasons that Cowboy State Politics is as successful as it is, and it is absolutely, the most listened to political podcast in the state of Wyoming. And one of the reasons for that is I'm independent. I'm not beholden to anybody. Of course, I have sponsors of the program. Couldn't run this thing if I didn't, but I'm not beholden to anybody. If a sponsor doesn't like what I say on my program, they can take a flying leap because I'm not going to bow down to anybody and not going to say what other people want me to. I'm independent, and that's what media is supposed to be. But one of the reasons why for the success of people like Joe Rogan, his show is the largest podcast in the world. Trump's interview, I don't know if you, and I remember at the time I told you how many people listened to that, but it was like 174 million people downloaded that interview. There's all sorts of different podcasts. In fact, it seems like just about everybody has a podcast. Some of them are far better than others. But the success of those is partially to blame on the media. because the media in general took a left turn at Albuquerque, and they just kept their foot on the gas and never stopped. And in many cases, the media wasn't even defending the very thing that allowed them to exist, the First Amendment. You had lots of people from PMSNBC and the Communist News Network claiming that people were guilty of misinformation and that we had to censor misinformation, and we needed a censorship task force. Well, that's absolutely absurd, because they are the very people that were traveling in misinformation. And so, I'm excited to see Jeff Bezos turn his paper's opinion page towards free markets and personal liberties. Now, we have to answer the question, again, is this virtue signaling? Yeah, we don't know. Have to wait and see. We saw Mark Zuckerberg say that, well, we're done with censorship at Facebook. And anecdotally, I saw a lot of censorship actually kind of ramp up after that announcement. So again, we have to trust but verify in all of these cases, and I don't think that we should take anything at face value, certainly not from a guy who's let his paper run wild, raging against those very things that he's claiming to defend. And so the question of, is what a public figure doing virtue signaling, or do they actually believe it? Are they actually going to act on it? Well, I've got another example of that coming up right after the break. And, again, we got to look at the motivations behind what people do and look at the effects of their actions. Are they actually being truthful? Do they mean what they say? Well, we're going to talk about that coming up next, because there might be some virtue signaling happening down here in the swamp. I'll tell you about it next. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to the live program every Tuesday through Thursday. Well, that's right now during the legislative session, but coming soon, Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, Open Line Thursday. If you want to be part of the show, my phone number here in the studio, down in the middle swamp. Well, actually, it's a phone number anytime we have Open Line Thursday or Open Line Friday. It's 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989 if you want to be part of the program. Now, before the break, we were talking about the question of, is it virtue signaling or not? And, in some cases, you can't really answer that question until you see the results of someone's actions. But there are some things sometimes where you can kind of figure that out ahead of time. And I'm not really suggesting that this next story is one of those, but maybe. I mean, we'll leave it up to you. So, from the Wyoming Turkey Vulture, no adjustment to the biennium budget this year. The Wyoming Senate has decided they're not going to pass a supplemental budget. They're just going to throw it in File 13 and be done with it. Now, if you're expecting me to boo-hoo over this, you're absolutely out of your mind. I've said from the very beginning that the Wyoming Constitution clearly says that this state runs on a biennial budget, which means during the budget session, we pass a budget, and that's good for 2 years. And it's only been fairly recently that supplemental budgets have become a big thing. And in this case, Wyoming's governor, Mark Gordon, said that he wanted over $650 million in the supplemental budget. Now, there's no arguing. And what is a supplemental budget for, before I go there? It's to handle those things that are unforeseen, that were emergencies that you couldn't have budgeted for during the budget session. So, fire, for example. Wyoming burned through a gigantic portion of all of their fire suppression funds, and nobody could have budgeted for that. We couldn't have figured out, hey, we're going to have a big fire season, so we need to fund it. There was no way to know about that ahead of time. So, yeah, we probably do need to fund those fire mitigation efforts. There's also what's called an external cost adjustment for the block grant funding for K-12 education. That relates to the story I led the program with, that there's a big lawsuit that says we're not funding enough. Well, every year there's an external cost adjustment or a cost of living increase, however you want to look at that. And there was one included in the supplemental budget. So there are things that our legislature has to do to stay within the bounds of the Constitution. One of those is to fund education. Now, before I get into this, I want to have a brief discussion about what the essential functions of government are. And really, government doesn't have that many jobs. It's to handle those essential services. So fire, police, roads, and I'm talking about on the local level right now. But fire, police, roads, water, sewer. Might be nice to have the snow plows, make sure the roads are open. And yeah, you got to have a little bit of administration of the town. But, really, when you get down to it, the role of government is not to provide a lot of the things that we pay for. For example, beautifying your town. Nope. That's not the proper role of government. Buying statues, that's not it either. Rec centers, civic centers. Now, I should probably put a caveat on that, because it is up to local counties if they want to have a recreation district. You can tax yourself if you want to for that, but that's not a proper role of government, right? And generally speaking, if we're taxed with our property taxes and sales tax, if you look at like the enumerated powers, the enumerated role jobs of government, rec centers, civic centers, golf courses, statues, none of those things are in there. Now, at the state level, things are a little bit different. We have a number of state agencies that have to be funded. Education is one of those. The Department of Health, even though I think that thing is a monstrosity, it is a department that was created by the legislature. So there are the necessary functions of government, and anything outside of that really we shouldn't be taxed on, and government shouldn't be paying for it. So, for example, the Wyoming Business Council, business development. It is impossible for government to create business. We can create the conditions by which business exists, but that's not a role of government. That's not something that's listed in the Constitution that says you will provide business development. That's absolutely ridiculous. That's not the government's job. The Wyoming Business Council, the Cultural Trust Fund, there's over 600 different coffee cans that Wyoming state government is paying for, many of which are not the proper role of government. So then Beitman, he says that he's going to be, we're not going to pass a supplemental budget, which again, if don't think that I'm going to cry about this. I think we had enough money passed in the biennial budget. However, there are some things that came up that you are required to fund. So Senator Beitman says that he's going to fund those things through individual standalone bills. Okay, here's the problem. He came up with hatched this whole scheme to do away with the supplemental budget almost at the end of the legislative session. So it was probably a matter of strategery when he announced. He didn't tell the House of Representatives that this is what he was going to do. It was just an announcement out of the blue last night. And they've clearly been planning it for a while, because there have been a number of amendments that have been added two different bills to fund those things. So, for example, there's a fire mitigation bill. And if you watched the floor of the House of Representatives yesterday, there was a big debate about fire mitigation. And actually, it was John Bear that got up and added an amendment to that bill to fund some loans for people who were impacted by the fire. I don't necessarily agree with, or it wasn't loans, it was grants that the amendment talked about. I don't agree with that. I think it should have been loans. But anyway, there are a number of bills that have had amendments to it. So, for example, this external cost adjustment or the cost of living increase, that was mainly for teachers. And I think when it left the House, it was a 4.8% increase in wages across the board. So for teachers and administrative staff, that was in the budget. Well, now he's put that in the block grant bill or the recalibration bill. So he added that amendment to that bill, and I'm sure that we'll find out about more of these little earmarks that he's put everywhere. So the question is what Senator Beitman is doing a conservative move? Well, I guess from the outside, yeah, because we don't need to be spending money on things that are not the proper role of government. That's why I started this conversation talking about that. And having watched the budget discussion on the floor, there's a lot of things that were included in the budget that were kind of superfluous. It didn't really have anything to do with, emergencies or unforeseen circumstances. So all of those are out. But there's a big problem here. That in Wyoming, we have a bicameral legislature, which means we have a House and a Senate. Not every state has that, but it pretty much resembles, what we've got in D.C. So you have two different bodies, and everything, and here's the big problem with all this, everything is pretty much on third reading right now in the second House, which means that if you add an amendment to a bill, which that's absolutely possible and is totally within the rules, there's only one vote, one time that the other chamber can talk about it, and that's on concurrence. And so they can only weigh in one time, and then, it's either an up or down vote, which maybe that's the way that it's supposed to be. But I think that we need to examine why Senator Beitman waited as long as he did. And I think that one of those things is the House had added an amendment, and by the way, the Senate added a similar amendment to backfill local communities with the tax that was in the budget. And I think the budget version of it was or the House version of it was, I don't know, $175 million or something. Something close to that. I don't know the exact figure. But if I had to say, that was the motivation behind killing the budget, because Senate File 69, the tax cut bill, which, by the way, was in a conference committee this morning. I was going to let us dip into that and listen to it, but it only lasted about 9 minutes. Members of the conference committee last night told me that the House is probably going to accept the Senate's position of a 25% tax cut. And it's going to include land with no backfill on it, which at 25%, I would argue that's not going to be a big enough impact to local counties to even require any sort of, funding from the state. But here's the political problem for everybody in the House and the Senate. When they went into the legislative session, it was, we're going to provide you a 50% tax cut. That's what the People's Initiative is. It's a 50% tax cut. And by this bill leaving the legislature the way that it is, Bridget Hill, that is the Attorney General, cannot say that the People's Initiative is largely the same thing that left the House, because you're talking about, 25% versus 50%. In Wyoming law, if there's an initiative and it largely matches a bill that goes through the legislature, the Attorney General can axe the initiative. That was one of the conversations that was floating around the Capitol around the budget discussion, is will Bridget Hill axe the People's Initiative if this 50% tax cut goes through? Well, now that's kind of off the table. So what could potentially happen is the 25% tax cut goes through, the governor signs it, and then next year during the 2026 election, the people approve a 50% tax cut. So now you've got a whole bunch of contradictions going there. There are some political problems concerning this. There's some, I think, some procedural problems with this, because you're adding amendments to a bill on third reading, which only leaves the other chamber one time to talk about it. and then it goes to conference committee. So, and let's just talk about that. So let's say that one of these bills that Beitman has added a spending measure to goes to concurrence, and the other house says, no, we're not down with that. We're going to go to conference committee. And then the first conference committee says, no, we can't reach a deal. We're not going to do this. Well, what happens is a second conference committee is appointed, and that one is called a free committee, which pretty much means they can do whatever they want. And so a decision is going to come out from a group of 6 people that didn't really have any discussion in either chamber, and that's the deal. You see, that's not how our government operates. We don't select just 6 people to decide what's going to happen with legislation, and then we just all have to accept it. That's not how our system works, nor is it how our system was ever set up to be. But there is a big potential for that to happen because of what the way that Senator Beitman handled this. And like I say, you're not going to catch me crying over not having a supplemental budget. Actually, I think it's kind of could be a good thing. There was a lot of stuff that we didn't even really need to be spending money on in the budget. Some things were important, though, and now hopefully they show up in other pieces of legislation. Who knows what's going to happen? We'll have more after a brief and completely outrageous profit timeout. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the Independence Network. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Concerned about the future of Wyoming, but unsure how to help? Honor Wyoming is giving you the chance to create real, lasting influence. And it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. The Honor Wyoming Bill Tracker is designed to empower Wyoming voters. We're cutting through the noise and equipping you with all the info you need to keep tabs on Wyoming lawmakers, as well as the tools to take action on the issues that matter to you most. Keeping a close eye on key legislation in Cheyenne, we've made it easy to stay informed by providing real-time bill updates and timely action alerts. Our one-click links make it easy to email key lawmakers at the right time. All you have to do is click and your voice will be heard. Ensuring lawmakers are listening to the people they serve year-round. Protecting the Wyoming way isn't a spectator sport, and voting is only half the story. Get involved today and do your part. With the Honor Wyoming Bill Tracker, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3.
Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. An incredible record, my friends, that no one in the lamestream Wyoming media can even come close to. And why would they even really want to try? Because, for so long, they've been pretty much filling you full of bullcrap that, starting at this point, they should just continue supporting the Redcoats because that is what they're good at. Well, one of my favorite actors, Gene Hackman, has died. His wife and his dog were found dead in their home, I guess yesterday. Let's see, from Fox News, and I quote, Legendary actor Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, were found dead in their New Mexico home. Officials said no foul play is suspected, but an investigation is ongoing. Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman, let's see here. Hackman was 95 at the time of his death, and his wife was 63. The office confirmed that no foul play is suspected as a factor in the deaths at this time, but the cause of death has not been determined, and an investigation is ongoing. Here's the press release from the Sheriff's Department. On February 26th at approximately 1:45 p.m., Santa Fe County Sheriff's deputies were dispatched to an address on Old Sunset Trail in Hyde Park, where Gene Hackman and his wife and dog were found deceased, the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office told Fox News Digital. Hackman was best known for his Oscar-winning performances in The French Connection and Unforgiven, and he also played in one of my favorite villains, Lex Luthor. And here's a little piece from, I believe this is from Superman 2. No, probably Superman 1. I can't even remember. Well, anyway, here we go.
You diseased maniac. Do you really think you could hide it from me by encasing it in lead? I'll mold this box into your prison bars. Don't touch that.
I told you. It's kryptonite, Superman. A little souvenir from the old hometown. I've spared no expense to make you feel right at home. You were great in your day, Superman. But it just stands to reason. When it came time to cash in your chips, this old, diseased maniac would be your banker. Mind over muscle?
You don't even care where the other missile's headed, do you?
Certainly I do. I know exactly where it's headed. Hackensack, New Jersey.
Hackensack.
I have to leave you now. No hard feelings. We all have our little faults. Mine's in California.
Gene Hackman. I don't think that he ever made a bad movie. I enjoyed his performances in just about everything. One of my favorite ones is, and I just forgot the title. It's Will Smith is in it. And it's, Gene Hackman plays this ex-government agent that is, he's paranoid. Well, not really paranoid about the government. He knows exactly what's going on in the government. It's one of my favorite movies. Another one, of course, is Unforgiven. Who could forget that one? Gene Hackman plays a sheriff in a fictional Wyoming town of Big Whiskey. Here's a little soundbite from that one.
Well, good afternoon, gentlemen. I'll have that 32, Bob. Now, little Bill, you will leave me at the mercy of my enemies. Enemies, Bob? You've been talking about the Queen again? On Independence Day?
Anyway, rest in peace, Gene Hackman, one of my favorite actors. Like I said, I don't think that he ever made a bad movie. And, being the kind of sci-fi nut that I am, Superman, all the Superman movies are in my top 10 list. Well, I mean, when you're talking about top 10, I guess I'll just give it like one little line, Superman movies, not all of them. Of course, top on the list is Star Trek. But anyway, Gene Hackman, a great actor. He's 95, and he'll be missed. Now, a piece I found in Breitbart this morning, and this is a bit of good news. A lot of times on the program, I feel like the little black rain cloud. I'm always bringing you bad news about what's happening in politics, but this happens to be a good one. From Breitbart, a recent poll shows that the decline of Christianity in the United States is slowing, perhaps leveling off. And I quote, Christianity's long decline in the U.S. may be slowing and could have leveled off. A poll released Wednesday by Pew Research suggests the Pew Religious Landscape Study showed that 62% of poll respondents identify as Christian, while 29% are religiously unaffiliated. UPI reports that Pew said in an executive summary of the poll findings that the Christian share of the population, after years of decline, has been relatively stable since 2019. The poll found that the Christian share of the U.S. adult population between 2019 and 2024 hovered between 60% and 64%. The decline in Christianity in America has been happening since 2007, before appearing to level off in this poll. And I think one of the main reasons, I know, one of the main reasons is our focus on secular humanism. That man is the measure of all things. And you only need really one example of what that is. So, for example, you can choose your gender. That's absolutely ridiculous. God created man and woman, and it's we've known that there's only two genders since, the very beginning. Every single person that is walking the face of this planet had a mother and a father. And that is a biological fact. You can pull up any biology textbook, and it'll pretty much explain that you need a male and a female to create another life. But there have been forces in this country that have said, you can be transgender, you can be a different gender, you can be a gender, you can be anything you want. There's 57, 75 different genders. It's all ridiculous. But there's been a focus on, we don't need to pray to God. We don't need to do all that. And that is absolutely wrong, my friends. And the truth is that God created the world and created you and me. And a good sign is that the decline in people who are attending church and who are believing has actually leveled off. So that's a good thing. Perhaps the tide has stemmed on secular humanism in America. I think it's a really good thing. But here is and it's in other countries, maybe it is not that way. And I believe this was in Reason magazine, but the article's entitled "Vance Was Right. Praying at home could be a crime depending on who passes the window," says a Scottish politician. This thing is terrifying. Quote, the author of Scotland's draconian protest restrictions around abortion clinics has admitted that people who live within the anti-free speech zone could be committing an offense if they pray in their homes, quote, depending on who passes by the window. British legacy media and establishment politicians were quick to accuse U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance of spreading, quote, misinformation after he asserted at the Munich Security Conference earlier this month that people could be arrested for praying in their homes if they live within the 200-meter or 656 foot protest prohibition zone surrounding abortion clinics in Scotland. However, in an interview with BBC's Scotland's Scotcast podcast, the legislation's author, Gillian McKay, appeared to confirm Vance's warning. Here's a little piece from that interview on the Scottish podcast. Now, just listen to this. I mean, it's the Scottish politician. She's absolutely caught off guard, and she knows it, tries to backpedal out of it. And then she says, well, it could be illegal depending on who walks by the window. Listen to this.
What if the accusation that even private prayer within your own home could amount to breaking the law? I mean, it's stretching it, but it's not wrong, is it?
It's absolute nonsense.
Is it? I'm looking at the letter that the government sent to householders.
Nowhere in it does it say private prayer.
No, but what it does say is that the activities in a private place like a house in these zones could be an offence if they can be seen or heard within the zone and are done intentionally or recklessly. Now, if you're telling me that prayer can be an offence outside a clinic, if you're inside your own house in that zone, theoretically, the law could be applied to you, couldn't it? I'm just trying to work out if there's any way in which J.D. Vance could be right.
I should be really clear.
Okay, so first she's like, no, that's rubbish. That's total rubbish. That's not true at all. But this is what politicians do. They craft policies with their intent is hidden behind the policy, and they try to defend it, saying, well, no, that's not really what it does. It's really just to protect clinics where we kill little babies. Let's listen to the rest of this, because she's about to admit that that J.D. Vance was absolutely right.
In and of itself is not an offence under this bill. We are not banning prayer under under the Act.
Performative prayer. If you're standing at a window with your hands together in front of your face in that classic kind of, that classic image of prayer, if you're standing at a window so people can see you, then could it be interpreted as an offence?
That then depends on who's passing the window and whether anybody
So he's not
can
wrong, is he, J.D. Vance?
No,
he's not wrong.
He is wrong because...
Oh, yeah. Wait a minute. So it depends on who's walking by the window. But J.D. Vance, no, he is wrong in what he's saying. Absolutely ridiculous. And let's just think about this, right? So the law says that you can't pray against an abortion clinic within 200 yards of it. Over 200 yards, actually. 656 feet. Now, in Wyoming, we've had a lot of conversations about gun-free zones, schools, right? So in Buffalo, you'll have a school on one side, and then there's a row of houses on the other side. Well, technically, the gun-free zone would include your house. So technically, it would be illegal to have a firearm in your own home next to a school. So this thing is saying that within 200 yards, you can't be caught praying. Oh my God, my friends. If you want another reason why you should be happy to live in the greatest country on the face of the planet, this is absolutely it. Other countries are banning free speech. They don't have the First Amendment like we do. It's one of the reasons I'm kind of scared to go abroad. I'm going to have to keep my mouth shut. Definitely not post on social media. Absolutely amazing, my friends. Don't ever forget, America is the greatest country that God ever created. We'll finish up in a minute. Christmas is over, and all of the fun holiday cheer has been had. And what are we all left with? Frigid Wyoming weather. Below freezing temperatures that you still have to go out in. That's right, you do have to go back to work at one point or another. And not to scare you, but think about this. Every single morning, you get to scrape the ice off of your windshield. Now, while I can't do anything with that, I can make sure that your feet stay nice and toasty warm while you're doing it. All you have to do is order a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. And to get you a pair of them, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
It's Open Line Thursday on Cowboy State Politics Live, Wyoming's most listened to political program. I'm your host, David Iverson, Wyoming's conservative voice. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Open Line Thursday on Cowboy State Politics Live. If you want to be part of the show, the phone number in the studio, the Swamp Studio, is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989 is the phone number to talk to me. It's, whatever you want to talk about. If you got something on your mind, something sticking in your craw, you just really don't like politics and you want to talk about something else, let me know. Give me a call, 307-374-8989. Now, everybody's been watching Doge, and I have enjoyed this, my friends, cutting the graft, cutting the waste out of the federal government. And it's almost like every single day there's something new that pops up on Elon Musk's list. And he's out with a new list from Breitbart News. Doge, millions of taxpayer dollars were poised to drive social and behavioral change in Uganda, developing socially responsible behaviors in Colombia. And I quote, millions of taxpayer dollars were poised to be completely wasted going towards efforts to drive social and behavior changes in Uganda and develop a socially responsible behavior in the country of Colombia. U.S. taxpayer dollars were spent in the following items, all of which have been canceled. Doge announced that providing a list of several ways the U.S. government was poised to waste hard-earned taxpayer dollars. For example, and listen to these dollar amounts, they're just absolutely incredible. $42 million was expected to go towards Johns Hopkins to research and drive social and behavioral changes in Uganda. Another $25 million was set to promote biodiversity conservation and promote illicit livelihoods by developing socially responsible behaviors in Colombia. Further, $40 million was set to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. Sedentary migrants, my friends. First, we're wasting money. Second, the name of it, all on its own, says that it's an absolute waste. You cannot be sedentary and a migrant at the same time. By definition, if you're sedentary, it means you're sitting on your butt, not doing anything, certainly not walking across a continent to come in our southern border. Let's see here. And a whopping $520 million was allotted for a consultant to do what Doge described as, quote, ESG investments in Africa and to mobilize private sector resources and expertise. The taxpayer money that was set to be wasted overseas does not end there, as Doge also received that there's another $69 million that was set to go to the Eurasia Foundation for Digital Transformation Activity in Europe. Other discoveries include, and again, I just can't believe that we're actually spending money on this. I think going forward, I need a stack of duct tape on my desk just so I can wrap my head up so it doesn't explode. But the $32 million to interviews for programs including media enabling democracy, inclusion, and accountability in Moldova, and the promotion of sustainable media outlets. I wonder what those media outlets are like. Do you suppose they're conservative? Do you suppose they're talking about freedom and personal liberties and the defense of free speech? You think so? Yeah, probably not. Another $7 million for the American Bar Association to promote the resilience of the Eurasian legal sector and civic society. First, the American Bar Association, that's a bunch of lawyers, and if you think about it, lawyers make a tremendous amount of money, and certainly the Bar Association doesn't need a donation from the U.S. taxpayer to promote Eurasian legal sector and civic society. $45 million to address the needs, opportunities, and challenges identified by activists and other civic actors engaged in nonviolent collective action. We don't even know what that means, but apparently we're not paying for it anymore. $52 million to the WEF, the World Economic Forum. According to Doge's official website, the total estimated savings rings in at about $65 billion. Thus far, Doge says this savings is a combination of what is described as fraud detection, deletion, contract lease cancellations, and contract lease renegotiations, asset sales, grant cancellations, workforce reductions, programmatic changes, and regulatory savings. The figures, currently updated twice a week, has an agency efficiency leaderboard showcasing which agency has led in the most savings. As of Wednesday, the Department of Education was in first place, followed by the General Services Administration and the EPA. The number one agency with the least total savings is the Department of State. Who would have thought that, right? You know, giving all this money. And by the way, yesterday, did you see where it was revealed that we are giving money, we're donating money in aid to China? We are giving money to the people that we're borrowing money from. So we borrow money from them at a super high interest rate, and then we give it back to them. I mean, it's like they can't lose, right? They don't have to do anything, and they make money off the U.S. taxpayer. Absolutely incredible, my friends. And, that we actually have to have a Department of Government Efficiency, first of all, is a sign that we are way outside of the enumerated powers, way outside of the bounds of the Constitution. And it's things like this. This is all at the federal level. But if you think about it at a state level, this is why I'm not boo-hooing over the budget. I think that there's some things that we've got to fix, and we've got to make sure that we fund those essential programs. But you're not going to hear me crying that the Senate canceled the budget. I wish they would have done it differently. I wish their motivations were genuine. I wish that it wasn't a political stunt. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't really think we need a supplemental budget. We have a biennial budget, and it's supposed to cover 2 years. And if we're addressing those things that come up that are unforeseen, that are emergencies, I'm totally okay with it. But we can't forget that we have a bicameral legislature, and the move by the Senate really was to frustrate the House and for Bo Beitman and the Senate to get their way. By the way, he's issued a press release, and I'll cover that on Saturday's installment of Weekend Update. Most of it is bullcrap. All right. As his accomplishments, he has House bills listed as if he was the guy that came up with the idea for all of them. It's total baloney. Even his big omnibus election integrity bill isn't his idea. But that's what redcoats do, right? They steal the ideas of other people and try to take credit for them. Well, that's why Cowboy State Politics is here and exists, is to point out the truth, to hold all of these politicians accountable. And I am definitely apt and up to the task. Well, we've burned through another busy broadcast hour on the program. Don't forget about Weekend Update on Saturday. It'll be a great program. There's going to be lots of stuff to talk about in the next couple of days. The legislative session is winding down, and there's going to be a ton of stuff to analyze and go through. But for now, my friends, from the depths of the Middle Swamp in Wyoming's capital of Cheyenne, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. Talk to you on Saturday.